Joanna, and she's with Telenor Ventures. Telenor Ventures looks at companies to try and figure out how they can change Telenor into a digital business company, right? Something like that?
Yes.
And you have a presentation for us?
Yes, I have.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. So I'm here today to talk about teaching old dogs new tricks. So Telenor is a pretty old dog, and 160-year-old in fact. And I'm here to talk about how we approach the digital transformation that we are going through, both as an industry, as a telco in general, and also what this opportunities means for us going forward in creating new industries. So just a quick recap about the Telenor Group. We are a mobile network operator. Started out 160 years ago in Norway, in Scandinavia. Today we are present in 13 markets across Scandinavia, Central Eastern Europe, and Asia. We have approximately 203 million subscribers of our telco services. And what is interesting with this, I see now that the figures are pretty small, but I wanted to highlight the fact that even though this is a Norwegian company, almost 50% of our revenue now is coming from Asia, from Southeast Asia. So out of our 200 million subscribers, we have 170 million in Asia. So we as a company really need to think global. And speaking of global and the trend that we are facing, the digital transformation, 100 years ago we provided fixed telephony, moved into mobile, and then messaging and data became an explosion to users. Users really adopted data services. This poses some trouble for us because we need to figure out how to grow. And we see that we are still a growth company, even though we are 160 years old. But we are seeing that we are growing from two different perspectives. We're a growth company, both in our telecom operations, meaning that we are adding on new markets. We're going into new growth markets. And we are also growing into new digital verticals. And I'm going to show you some examples of that. So in terms of new digital verticals, we look at completely new industries that have a potential to grow with us as owners of companies within these industries. And in fact, we have already established 4 different verticals where we have a very active M&A approach, where we go in and acquire standalone businesses that can function without the traditional telco, just pure standalone, and then growing portfolios around those verticals and businesses. So the first one we looked into kind of naturally was IoT, or machine to machine in the telecom language. We started out a company called Telenor Connection in 2008. It was actually kind of an internal startup that is now a billion revenue company that started out this vertical. We see that Internet of Things and everything getting connected is really at the tipping point because hardware is getting so accessible and cheap, and developers are now getting their hands on it and being able to develop new apps and services, and users are taking it to their hearts in terms of wearables, in terms of smart homes, and so on. So it's a very interesting business to be in. Another area that is slightly more relevant for you guys is our online classifieds and marketplaces that we have invested in. So in 2013, we entered a joint venture together with the media company Schibsted to invest in online classifieds in Southeast Asia and Latin America. So this is now a solid business that actually has a reach of users that kind of extends our mobile subscribers, which is pretty interesting if you look at it from a consumer reach perspective, where we are big. The third area is financial services, and this is kind of something happening in between industries when there are blending between each other, media, telecom, finance. So not many know that but basically, actually, one of the largest banks in Southeast Asia, called Easypaisa, was founded by Telenor. And we also founded Serbia's first online bank, Telenor Banka. And we see that this is an opportunity for us because the bank industry is quite regulated. And in these emerging markets where you don't have identity numbers and so on, you need to find new ways to identify people. And what better way to do that but through their mobile SIM card? So we're using this as identity for creating bank accounts for people and being part of the financial inclusion in the emerging parts of the world. A recent vertical that we ventured into is digital advertising. So a couple of months ago, we announced the acquisition of a firm out of New York called Tapad. So Tapad are providing a technology that allows for advertisers to follow users across mobile devices, visitors across mobile devices seamlessly. So you can track whether they are interacting with your brand from a mobile phone, then switching on to a tablet, and then maybe back to your mobile. So this is something that is very interesting as a standalone business, but also potential to create synergies for us with our telecom company. And we spot startups quite frequently. This is part of our growth strategy, to work actively with startups and spot the next promising concept. Because although we are a large organization with 36,000 employees, we also do active M&A. We can't be comfortable in knowing that we will find the next big thing or invent the next big thing ourselves. We need to work with startups. So we are actively spotting startups. And what we look for is startups, tech startups, that have a strategic fit with our areas, that have a useful technology that we can take to a commercial stage in some part of the world, or that has a clear product market fit with us and that has an appeal to our 200 million customers, or a relevant market, for example, in Southeast Asia. So this is about what we do. But there is something behind that, of course. Digital transformation of a 160-year-old company, how do you actually do that? How do you need to think about that opportunity and challenge? Well, for us, it's important that we address this both from our core traditional telco side and also from the new areas. So actually, we as Telenor operate on a split vision. If you look at our digital business, this is looking at digital at large, venturing into completely new verticals, like I showed to you here earlier. We have an active M&A agenda and are not hesitant to go into something completely new if we see that we have a value to provide as an industrial investor. But we can't lose track of our traditional telecom operations because it's still our large cash cow and where the majority of the growth is coming from in the near future. So we need to kind of reposition the telecom company. What is the telecom company of tomorrow? Well, we are saying, our CEO is saying that it's not a telecom company, it is a digital service provider. It's not a traditional mobile network operator anymore. The network in itself is of little value to the end user. It's about engaging with these digital services that they have adopted and are adopting. So this means that in terms of digital products, we are doing internal incubation to come up with new concepts. We are innovating with startups externally, opening up our own assets to make startups make use of our network and the data that we have. In terms of our operations, we are also looking at our sales and marketing and our retail and our tech stack in terms of the software world. What does that look like in a software-based world? So just to give you an example, it is technically possible to provide a telecom service pure on software, something that Google is doing, right? Google Fi. So we have a project ongoing internally in Telenor called LOLTEL, lots of laugh. that is actually building a software-based telco. And it's fully up and running, we are testing it out, but this is about the need for us to disrupt ourselves. And I just wanted to share with you that for Telenor, this is not something that has come without a journey. I mean, digital transformation, it really takes an agile mindset, and you need to be able to kind of take different positions and test out. So I have to be honest, you know, before 2007, we didn't really care. And then came iPhone, and things started to happen. So we started to take testing out new positions in the digital space. And actually back in 2010, up until 2012, we kind of had an era in Telenor called the Big Experiment. We wanted to create a completely new global tech brand called Comoyo. So we established a completely separate unit that produced new services, for example, Netflix-like services and so on. No relation to Telenor whatsoever. But we saw that we needed to leverage the strengths of the traditional telco. And we couldn't fully do that by being completely on the outside. So we brought a lot of the competence in and were a bit tighter on the governance and started to align more with our 13 markets and leveraging the strengths. So that has been a journey together with the market development in general as well. And today we see that we are becoming a digital Telenor. It's not about having digital as a separate unit somewhere. It's about digitalizing the whole company and also taking opportunities outside the traditional telco. So looking forward, this was more about looking back. Looking forward, what are the trends that we care about? I'm going to share a few trends that we are spotting right now. First one is we see that local e-commerce is going mobile only. And this is pretty interesting because this is not something that we have spotted in Europe. This is something that we have seen in Singapore, in Southeast Asia. And why is that? Why is it that these mobile marketplaces are born out of Asia and being innovated from there? Well, if you look at the history, the people that are adopting internet now in Southeast Asia, they have never experienced internet through a desktop. They don't even know the concept of a PC. They don't have that framework and that mindset. So when you get the first time they meet internet, it's on a smartphone. So this means that when the developers start to think about use cases, they're not about mobile first. It's mobile only. And it's really picking up, it's really growing, and we are seeing now copycats in Europe. And it's interesting with mobile marketplaces in general, but what is even more interesting as a trend going forward is the mobile-only mindset. Because our belief is that even though there's a lot of innovation on the tech startup side going on in Europe and the US, there will be a lot of interesting things coming out of India, China, Southeast Asia in the quite near future. Another thing that we are interested in is the fact that everything gets connected. As I mentioned, one of our first digital vertical that we established was the Internet of Things. And we see that this is a massive development taking place not only on the consumer side of things, but also on different industrial verticals. So smart cities, transportation is also getting connected, homes are getting connected, manufacturing is getting connected. And this is interesting for us because it means that we can provide many more SIM cards to get stuff connected. Yes. But that's not...
You just sell SIM cards.
Yeah. Of course. No, I mean, because SIM cards are also becoming virtualized. So that's not the interesting part here. The interesting part is that all these sensors, they send out a lot of interesting data. So this is big data, basically. But this data has no value if you don't know how to process it, analyze it, work with it, and give back value to the users or to the clients that are using it. So this is the sweet spot for us. This is what's interesting for a company like us, Telenor. And it will be very interesting to see different services coming out as a consequence of cities, transportations, and manufacturing becoming connected. Virtual reality. I'm afraid it's a bit of a buzzword by now, but we think it will have an impact. Although we think of virtual reality now as people were thinking about the smartphone before the iPhone. It was like we were thinking about the different use cases. Oh, what are you going to use your mobile phone for? Are you going to look at stock trends or weather alerts or what? Well, you don't know until you actually get your hands on it and start developing. And we think that, well, Mark Zuckerberg, you see here, I saw him at the Mobile World Congress earlier this year, and he stated that Facebook believed that virtual reality is the next computing platform. So the one before that was a smartphone. Now comes virtual reality. And we think that is very interesting. Definitely our customers will be affected by this, by virtual reality in some shape or form. And then another one is startups. Tech startups in general is really something that we have on our watch list, because they are spearheading this market of innovation. They are always closest to the customers. They have no legacy. They look at the pain points of the users and just go fix. And they are so fast, and they are in every single corner of the world. So they are impossible to ignore in a way. And what we are seeing is that these kind of underdogs, they're not only hitting traditional 160-year-old companies like our own, Telenor, they're also hitting, more younger internet players, for example, Google. So one case of a startup is a company called What 3 Words. So they are just looking at one specific thing, and that is about the address system. You have your postal codes, you have your street names, and so on, right? But there are many parts of the world where you don't have this. And in dense cities like Mumbai, or for example, it's impossible to kind of, if you're a taxi driver, if you don't know your way by heart, it's kind of difficult to find a place. So what 3 Words are doing is that they have mapped every 3x3 square meter part of the world and giving that a specific name based on a combination of 3 randomly picked words. So that could be car, chair, wheel. That's one part of the world. That is the address.
So where do I live?
You have to check it up. I don't know. there is a word. Oh, there is a combination.
There's a word.
There is a word combination for that.
So I go to What 3 Words and find that out?
Yes, you should do that.
Now, did you invest in these companies?
No, we have not invested in these companies, although I would have liked to invest in at least one of them.
Which one?
Truecaller. So which is the next one? So Truecaller you may have heard of. They are kind of attacking one single part of the Yellow Pages, which is the phone directory of consumers or people, people like you and I. Because this is something that we have as an infrastructure in the western part of the world. But in emerging markets, this concept of a directory doesn't exist. So what Truecaller are doing is that they are crowdsourcing a global phone directory. They have more than 1 billion phone numbers across the world now. And it gives a huge value to people, for example, in India, where people are calling and you have no idea of who the caller is. With this caller ID that Truecaller are providing, you can easily see who is calling you, and also whether it's a scam, whether this person calling you is reliable or not. And it's very interesting. More than 1 billion phone numbers in their directory, and it started out as a small company in Stockholm, Sweden, 3-4 years ago. They had no idea by then that their largest market was going to be India. So now they're one of the top 10 apps in India, actually. And then finally, from a telco perspective, voice and SMS is being disrupted by new formats of communication like stickers and video. So startups is something that we are really looking closely at and trying to work with. And I just wanted to share one piece of advice, something that at least we have been thinking of on our journey, in terms of how do you meet this digital transformation? Well, try to think of your business as a startup. If your business was launched today, what startup would that be? I think it's kind of interesting if you do that kind of mental exercise to release your mindset from, this is my product suite, these are my revenue streams, this is how I work, these are my processes, these are my people. Just look at it from the end user's perspective. What is the customer's pain point? How do I solve that in the most efficient way if I didn't have all the legacy I have today? You might discover something new and something very interesting. And you might then discover your future disruptor. So, because it's the case, right? Large companies, we all started out with solving one business or one pain for one user. And then we grow older, we got bigger, we started to track our revenues, we started to track our products, and then we kind of get so consumed about revenues and products that we lose track of our customers. And then we're getting disrupted. So to avoid that, try to think of, if you were to launch your business today, what startup would it be? So, thank you.
It's great. Thank you so much. I have a couple questions.
Yes.
And there might be questions in the audience, but what's a Norwegian telephone company doing tons of business in Asia? I mean, how did that happen, and how did you get there, and what are the cultural challenges of that?
Yeah, I would like to say, of course, that it was pure strategy, very well thought out from the very beginning and so on. But actually, it boiled down to one person's very strong vision 20 years ago, the CEO of the company at the time, who saw the opportunity to go to Asia.
Uh-huh.
So we did.
And so now you're leveraging that base.
So now we are leveraging that base. But the thing is that we were not the only ones entering Asia 20 years ago. Many other telecom companies did, but we stayed there. We went through, the
hardship, the hard knocks,
Yeah.
as we say.
And we see that there is also actually for us a cultural opportunity, a cultural benefit of being a Scandinavian company coming into these markets, because we have quite flat organizations. We respect people's competence, we see people as individuals, we work as teams, and bringing these thoughts into an Asian corporate environment is actually very beneficial.
What are some of the financial characteristics, this goes in and out, that you all look at when you're deciding to invest in? Are they investments or are they acquisitions that you're doing, or both? So do you look at, average revenue, recurring revenue? Do you look at cost of acquisition? What metrics do you look at to evaluate companies?
Yeah, well, first of all, we split between looking at financial investments, or for financial purposes, and investments as a strategic and industrial investor. So these are the fundamental choices where you can invest by, according to us. Yeah. And we see ourselves as an industrial investor. So this means that when we look at a company, it has to generate some kind of revenue.
You don't care if they're losing money?
I mean, to some extent,
You're looking at it for the strategic fit, not for financial return.
Yeah, we would never buy a company just purely out of their user base, for example, because that's so volatile. Yeah. It doesn't show the underlying value of the company and where we can come in as an industrial investor and support and scale.
How many of the companies out here would like Joanna's company to invest in them? Look what you have. We're making a marketplace for you right here, right now.
Great.
So, is that it? Do we have any more? That's good.
You're going to be with us tonight, right?
Unfortunately, no.
Oh, you're not?
No. I'm around for a little while.
A little while, okay.
Well, let's give Joanna a nice warm round of applause, please.